Hello and welcome to the Maniacal Mini. I know it's been a while, but we are back with another great tutorial. Today we're going to be working on Xandire from Xandire's Truth Seekers. So as you can see, I primed the model with a zenithal highlight, covered in a secret sauce, and a light dry brush to bring out all those beautiful details. And although we're going to be doing a more traditional paint job on this figure, setting up that zenithal will help us when it comes time to do our highlights and shadows. It also sets up for the use of some contrast paints to really help bring this model to life. So I will just say that all the regular paints used in this video are from the Two Thin Coats paint line from Duncan Rhodes. I just want to point out that these paints are amazing. Games Workshop might want to be a little bit worried. So the first paint I'm going to be using on the skin is going to be Barbarian Brawn. It is a great base color for the skin, and with a wash, it's going to allow us to bring much more life into the skin. So I'm using the Barbarian Brawn straight from the bottle on a wet palette, and although I have some general moisture on the palette, I'm not going to thin this paint down much. I just want it to flow, and as the name suggests, we are going to be doing two thin coats so that we get a nice homogeneous layer. There isn't much skin on the model, but I definitely want it to stand out in the end. What I'm going to do now is take some of the flesh wash from the set and give the skin a nice coat. We want to make sure that we don't let it pool up in the recesses, and moving our brush to avoid streaks, but if you do happen to get some of those, that's okay, because we are going to smooth those out in the next steps. And as you saw, I used a hair dryer to speed up the drying process so we can maintain a good workflow. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to thin down that same Barbarian Brawn to around a Type 2 glaze consistency. We're going to use the original color as our first highlight, and we're going to make sure that we don't overload our brush in this step because it can easily flood the model in some of the details, but however at this stage it is easily fixable with a touch more flesh wash and then coming back in with Barbarian Brawn. But the reason we're going to be thinning our paint to a glaze is because we want to start working on the smooth transitions that we see in natural skin tones, and the way that I do this is to start from the shadow area and bring your brushstrokes to meet at the brightest point. Maneuvering the paint to the highlights, this glaze will help us build up a little at a time and we can get some great results. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to add some dwarven skin, about a 30% to the 70% base color. We are also going to thin this down to a Type 2 glaze and continue to work towards the brightest points. We want to make sure that we leave a little bit of the previous step visible as we transition to smaller and smaller areas. One thing that can really help out the smoothness of the transition is to add little lines and stippling to really blend the layers together. So that's going to be it for the skin as we move into our cloak. And for the base color on this one, I'm going to be using Berserker Red in a base layer consistency to maximize coverage. I am starting out with a deeper red because I wanted to have a more desaturated look in the shadows while having the brightest spots be built up with multiple passes of glazing. So we want to keep moving pretty quickly in this stage, and since we only did the skin, which is quite sparse, you don't need to worry too much if you accidentally get some paint where it shouldn't go. Obviously we want to try to be as neat as possible. You can see I was not, because we are going to be introducing a few contrast paints for some areas to help us get them looking good with minimal effort, while the focal points we take our time to build up since they are one of the most important things to focus on, so you have eye-catching details. Now, I do apologize. I seem to have lost some footage here that was supposed to come just before this step, but it wasn't a huge part. So what I did was I just gave the cloak a wash with Drakenhof Nightshade to give some deep purple tones to the shadows on the cloak. However, now I am doing a similar process to how the skin was done, being that we are going to bring back in the Berserker Red, thin down to a glaze, and then we're going to start building our transitions. Once again, we're going to move our brush strokes from the shadow areas to the highlight points, where we're going to have them meet, and it's going to start building up over each additional pass. We're going to do a little less, a little less, a little less until it builds up to those really bright high points. So I added in some Sanguine Scarlet at another 30% new to 70% base color, and thinning that down once more to a glaze, we are once again going to focus on bringing our brush strokes together. To meet at the highlights, make sure we're not overloading our brush so we don't pool up in any of the recesses, and we're going to make sure that we're moving that paint around into the proper areas. That way we don't, come up with some patchy spots and, something that's going to look a little bit unnatural. So I'm going to be moving into an even mix of the two colors, which is the Sanguine Scarlet and the Berserker Red. We're going to keep that same consistency though of the glaze that we've relied on in previous steps, and we are going to continue working on building up that saturation to the brightest points and kind of smoothing out those other transitions on the cloak. So don't be afraid here to use a little bit of stippling, a little bit of scratching, add a little bit of life to it, but we're going to go for that nice satin look on this cloak in the end. And the final step here is going to be an edge highlight with Demon Red. Later on I'm going to cover the whole model in streaking grime to really tie everything together while kind of knocking back just a little bit of the saturation to a more realistic point. But the edge highlight will really make all those sharp edges pop out after that stage. And the way I do my edge highlighting is just to thin down the paint with just a touch of water, just above glaze consistency, so that we can maintain the opacity while developing that smooth edge line. I do use kind of a thinner brush for this one. I usually stick to maybe a 1 or a 0 just so I can get that really faint but super crisp and clean line. So the next steps that we're going to do are going to be some of the contrast steps. Because we set it up so easily, and the effect we're going to get will be much quicker and slightly better looking right away without expending too much time on these parts. Since they are so small, I'm not going to really waste too much time on them. But the first one I'm going to be using is Endurance Brown from Scale 75 Instant Colors. The reason I like that range so much is because of the natural look of the saturations. When you do put it on the model that's been set up with a good zenithal and dry brush, and it kind of makes edge highlighting that much easier too if you get a good dry brush going. But as you can see, I'm just laying that down for the leather. So the next contrast paint that I'm going to be using is Black Legion from Games Workshop. The reason I chose this one for all the undercloth is because I didn't really need that cloth to be a focal point since we are going to have so many others in the end. And because it will tie in overall with the final look so well, it also has an amazing coverage and will really black out areas super quick, so we don't have to spend too much time on them. And so the last contrast paint we're going to be using is a Speed Painter from Army Painter, Dark Wood. I really love the natural wood tones that you get with this color, and since we're only going to be using it on 2 spots, we're going to achieve a really great result super quick, so we won't have to do much with it, so that's awesome. So I'm going to be moving into the armor now, and for the bulk of it, I know I wanted to do a more traditional silver armor with gold accents, so I'm going to be using Surcoat Silver from the Two Thin Coats paints. These metallics I am absolutely in love with. For me, they almost rival the Scale 75 metallic sets, and there's only 3 of each, and it's crazy. I mean, each one of them is so good, and you can, mix them in different amounts and achieve different results, so they're really good. Going into this, I know that I wanted to add a lot of the reflection points by hand, so I am going to be using the black wash from the Two Thin Coats paint all over the silver metallics. This is going to help us knock back the initial shine. It's also going to help us locate the areas that are going to have those shine points. Now I'm going to be bringing back in that Surcoat Silver to establish our shine points. We want to be very deliberate in where we place these and make sure that you're rotating the model as you go to hit the points from different angles. However, the most important are the shines facing the model center focus. That's the angle of the model that's going to be facing you, giving the best view of the details, such as highlights, shadows, and others such as, belt, wood, details, etc. So the last thing that I'm going to be doing is laying down our gold with dragon gold. I am only going to be using this one kind because I'm going to be relying on the layer of streaking grime to act as our shadows. And when we use our reductive technique to remove it with a Q-tip and mineral spirits, it should reestablish our shine in and at the highlights. So I'm going to be picking it up here after the streak and grime has been applied and removed back off the model with the reductive technique, and we can already see how well everything is tying together tonally and saturation wise. Now I'm going to start working on the lantern in her hand. So I'm just going to thin down a little white paint and pick out the individual panes of the lantern, leaving darkness in the shadows around them. What I've done now is I've turned my airbrush down to around 20 psi, and I'm going to start working to set up that OSL glow using a little white ink to keep the glow transparent. Keeping the airbrush at around 20 psi still, we're going to be using a little bit of yellow ink from the Scale 75 Inkintensity set to get that nice yellow glow. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to reapply that glaze of white ink on the brightest points in the panes of the lantern to boost it up even more, and I'm also going to do a little edge highlighting on the overhang lid on the lantern to establish glow points that are catching a lot of the light. And the final step for our OSL glow is going to take some yellow floor from Scale 75 paints, and we are going to give the whole lantern front a once over to add a nice extra bright glow effect. Alright, so that is going to be a wrap on this one. Just so everybody knows too, I am going to be focusing more on putting out quality tutorials as opposed to making sure that they're set on a schedule. So right now I can't really promise when the next one will be, but I promise you that it is in the works. And I really do hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, consider leaving us a like or a follow. But either way, I hope you have a good one.